The narrative for today commences with a space mining ship called the Borealis. The vessel is currently traversing an immense stretch of the cosmos, transporting the miners who remain in slumber within their cryogenic capsules. These miners have approximately 4 years of travel time left until they finally arrive at their intended location. However, prior to that event occurring, an asteroid unexpectedly collides with the vessel.
Warning. Catastrophic.
The ship's artificial intelligence system, which is called Leonard, instantly responded by rousing all the miners so they could start the emergency evacuation right away. In that explosion, many cryogenic pods were destroyed, either from the impact or from entering the planet's atmosphere. However, by sheer luck, one specific capsule, which held a miner known as Andy, successfully executed a rough emergency landing. Next, a few moments later, Andy finally woke up and found himself in the middle of the mountains. Not knowing what to do, Andy then tried to contact the ship, but there was no response. Then, shortly thereafter, Leonard urgently cautioned Andy to promptly vacate the rescue capsule, a necessity due to the extremely unstable nature of the terrain directly beneath it. Unfortunately, due to the previous impact, the capsule door could no longer be opened. Employing numerous different methods, Andy struggled to escape, eventually succeeding in shattering the window pane by utilizing the onboard fire suppression unit. However, at the very moment he was preparing to leave, his capsule unexpectedly tumbled, ripping his suit and resulting in a critical oxygen leak. Upon recognizing the situation, Andy swiftly deployed a specialized sealant spray to mend the rupture. Following that, Andy painstakingly maneuvered himself out from beneath the debris of the capsule. However, before he had a chance to survey the area, Andy was once again shocked to see the Borealis vessel, which had also fallen onto this very same planet.
I have located the Borealis.
Following the impact of the shockwave, Andy then proceeded to inquire of Leonard regarding their current precise location. Leonard subsequently informed him that they had arrived within an uncharted stellar system, and furthermore, Andy was the very first individual to discover this planet, thus granting him the privilege to bestow a name upon it. Well, after refusing several times to give a name, Andy finally named this planet.
Fuck off, Leonard. Searching. The name, fuck off, Leonard.
Why not?
Request confirmed.
Not long after, Andy saw a beam of light in the distance. Curious, he decided to head towards it while trying to make contact using the radio. During his journey, Andy came across the debris field of the Borealis, which contained one of the escape capsules. As Andy attempted to retrieve the oxygen tank, he discovered to his dismay that it too had sustained damage and was completely inoperable. Andy, feeling nearly overwhelmed with frustration, was then forced to make the difficult choice to press onward toward the light source.
Oxygen level will be depleted by...
Next, when Andy reached the light source, he apparently found another survivor named Dwayne, who was also very happy to see Andy. To ensure their survival, Dwayne proposed the grim idea of consuming the remains of their deceased comrades. Dwayne was convinced that they were potentially the sole survivors remaining from the earlier catastrophic incident. Relating his background, Dwayne further clarified that the corporation opted for a shortcut by traversing the asteroid belt in an effort to conserve necessary fuel reserves, which subsequently caused the accident to happen. Dwayne, working in the communications department, intended to transmit a distress signal back towards Earth, specifically to solicit aid and rescue. He advised Andy that the signal transmission would require approximately 8 months to successfully reach Earth, and even after reception, the corporation would require an additional 2 years beyond that point before they could possibly reach their location. So, Dwayne then advised that both of them should promptly proceed in a southerly direction in order to locate the remaining half of the Borealis contingent and establish their encampment at that location. Upon hearing this news, Andy subsequently began to lose all hope. Inadvertently, he severed the cable, which resulted in the emergency lighting system shutting down completely. Well, just as Andy turned around to fix it, unexpectedly a creature suddenly appeared.
For some air. There we go.
Andy, unaware of what had just happened, suddenly became confused upon realizing Dwayne had vanished without a trace. But even though he was surprised, Andy proceeded to finish sending the distress signal that Dwayne had previously been working on. Following that, Andy picked up Dwayne's weapon and set off to search for the remaining survivors. Then, after walking quite a distance, Andy heard the voice of someone named Naomi speaking over his communication radio, in which she told Andy that her leg was stuck within the rescue capsule. After she provided the location, Leonard cautioned Andy that the region where Naomi was situated was very unstable, featuring poor sight lines, and because the distance was too great, Andy would likely lose all his oxygen if he tried to reach that spot. Conversely, Leonard urged Andy to take a safer path toward the other half-borealis wreckage to refill Andy's oxygen, but here, Andy, it seems, chose instead to go rescue Naomi after she had explicitly asked Andy not to abandon her, clarifying that she possessed sufficient oxygen reserves for them both. During their journey, the pair subsequently became acquainted with one another. They conversed for such an extended period that, completely unaware, as evening arrived, Andy began to sense something out of the ordinary. He perceived a movement within the shadows. Andy subsequently instructed Leonard to investigate that specific vicinity. Regrettably, it turned out that Leonard was unable to carry out that assignment. Upon hearing Andy utter Leonard's name, Naomi then stated that Leonard was an obsolete artificial intelligence model that their company had probably deliberately employed as a cost-saving measure. Several hours later, Andy, who was still continuing his walk, kept sensing shadowy figures running around inside the darkness. A short while later, Andy discovered several peculiar footprints, and when he followed those tracks, the trail ended at a pit that was completely encircled by thick spiderwebs.
Something could just come up and eat you. Just...
Hell no. No, I don't do webs.
While reporting what he had just seen, Andy quickly continued on his way. But even so, he began to feel and observe an ever-increasing number of spiderwebs scattered all around his surroundings. In an effort to diffuse the tension, Naomi then inquired as to the reason Andy accepted this particular assignment. Because in Naomi's opinion, anyone who agrees to take on a position such as this is typically someone who is not leading a good life down here on Earth. Indeed, Naomi's statement seemed to spark a memory in Andy concerning both his wife and his son. Andy then informed Naomi that his wife and son had actually abandoned him quite some time in the past. A short time following that moment, Andy sensed that something was beginning to draw nearer to his location. At this point, Leonard cautioned Andy regarding the presence of several tracking signals that were closing in on his current position. Oddly enough, those particular trackers were supposed to belong to the deceased members of the crew. As the tracker was getting nearer and nearer, Andy then shot off a flare in order to get a clear view of the surrounding atmosphere. And immediately after that flare was launched, Andy, who managed to stay alive, then re-established contact with Naomi as he worked on repairing his oxygen hose that was leaking. In the midst of the panic, the two of them accidentally heard a sound from Dwayne asking for help. It turned out that this Dwayne was still alive and was currently situated in a location that wasn't far from where Andy was currently situated. Upon learning this information, Naomi then requested that Andy assist Dwayne. At first, Andy declined because his oxygen levels had dropped and his GPS device was also malfunctioning. But even so, Naomi mentioned that Dwayne possessed ample reserves of oxygen, and she would also assist in directing him to safety. Eventually, Andy consented, and reluctantly had to go back to the precise location where Dwayne was currently situated. To make a long story short, when he got there, Andy discovered that Dwayne was struggling with all his might against those monsters. When Andy got closer, Dwayne yelled out that he possessed a strategy to take down all of them. However, before he had the chance to explain it,
I know how to beat.
Andy, talk to me. What's happening?
well, after learning that Dwayne was dead, one of those creatures accidentally started sensing Andy's presence. At this point, Naomi then attempted to provide assistance by diverting the attention of those strange beings. This was accomplished by activating the illumination on a few of the rescue capsules situated right there at that location. Taking advantage of that opportunity, Andy then tried to escape as far away as possible. Two monsters then tried to chase him, leading to Andy stumbling over something in a peculiar misty zone where, surprisingly, those beings instantly halted their pursuit and ceased hunting Andy.
They're not attacking.
Oh, what do you mean? Andy, what's happening? Hello? Okay, that's good, right?
These things,
After Naomi confirmed that Dwayne was dead, Andy then tried to calm Naomi, who sounded very frightened. Although she did not witness the event, Naomi at least understood that her own location was potentially at risk. From there, Andy then continued his journey by continuing to enter that foggy area. As Andy moved through the mist, he found a group of fireflies that looked very beautiful. However, shortly after he became captivated, those fireflies abruptly turned a blazing red and began their assault on him. Luckily, Andy successfully dodged the swarm of fireflies attempting to destroy his helmet. Realizing the recent events, Naomi then suggested that perhaps those fireflies were the very reason the earlier monsters were hesitant to pursue her. But not long after Andy heard a sound, something from underneath suddenly seized him.
No, something else. Something's definitely here.
Are you okay?
I'm being pulled into a mouth.
Don't panic, okay?
I'm not gonna make it.
What are you doing? Okay, something.
You can name all the plants.
Stay alive, understand?
At that critical juncture, fortunately, Andy still had the presence of mind to call Leonard for assistance, informing him that he was currently suffering from a cardiac arrest, which prompted Leonard to rapidly engage the implanted cardiac defibrillator system within Andy's clothing.
I'm having a heart attack.
We stand 5 feet clear of.
Leonard.
Even though he was safe for a moment, Andy was still pursued by that monster, leading him to tumble down into a cavern that was completely filled with the very same glowing fireflies he had seen previously. Those little shy, luminous bugs continued to assault him relentlessly, forcing Andy to make a desperate escape toward the opposite wall of the cavern. While outside, Andy, becoming aware that his suit contained merely a small reserve of breathable oxygen, made the swift decision to sprint in the direction of Naomi, who was now positioned just 800 meters distant.
Some 1% left. Hurry. Hi.
Andy, who successfully made it, then swiftly entered the capsule where Naomi proceeded to assist him by attaching his oxygen cable to his. Once that was done, Andy then utilized a safety apparatus to elevate Naomi's pinned leg. After exerting his utmost effort, Andy finally succeeded in releasing Naomi's leg, simultaneously confirming that her limb had avoided any broken bones. When they got out, Naomi offered her gratitude for him having assisted her, while observing Andy wrapping a piece of metal around her leg to help her walk better. However, amidst their discussion, they were abruptly shocked by a cluster of beings that now seemed to be closing in on them. In her escape, Naomi requested that her sophisticated artificial intelligence, Amy, administer morphine into her system to manage the severe pain she felt in her lower limbs. Well, after running quite a distance, they arrived at the Borealis ruins. Since they were both tethered by the identical oxygen tubing, their mobility was consequently limited, causing them to stumble and fall. Luckily, Naomi successfully diverted the attention of a few of the creatures by deploying a flare, which gave them the opportunity to flee and make it to the surviving part of the Borealis vessel. Andy and Naomi successfully entered and sealed the door in the nick of time, right before one of the creatures could launch an assault on them. Immediately upon entering, Naomi started looking for any operational compartment by creating a complete map of the ship's interior. They eventually located a chamber that offered a livable space and sufficient provisions to sustain them until rescue could reach them. But, at the very moment they were preparing to step inside, the two of them noticed a blood trail, which when they examined it closely, they discovered that some kind of monstrous being had evidently made its way into Borealis. Once they had escaped the immediate danger, both of them resolved to depart right away. However, only a few steps later, some kind of creature emerged from the area behind them. Cursing his luck because he was panicking, Andy mistakenly shut the door to the room where they were situated, which was a room that could only be unlocked from the exterior. Once they recognized the error they had made, Andy and Naomi were left with no choice but to accept their fate, and following a short interval, the pair proceeded to take off their individual helmets. While clearly terrified, Andy then started talking, during which he presented Naomi Naomi with a video recording featuring his wife and his child. As it transpired, his wife and son had perished in an automobile accident while they were on their way back from his birthday celebration. From that moment onward, Andy has been burdened by guilt because he was the sole person to survive that particular accident. Andy felt that it should have been him who passed away instead of his wife and child. After hearing Andy's story, Naomi then attempted to share her own narrative. Naomi stated that the moment Andy rescued her served as evidence that her existence still held significance. In this place, Naomi also clarified to Andy that she had truly lost her faith in other individuals. However, the actions taken by Andy ultimately demonstrated that there remained someone out in the world who could provide her with the hope necessary to keep living. After listening to their respective stories, the two embraced. Yet, during this moment, Naomi unintentionally discovered a firefly clinging to Andy's clothing. Following that, Andy requested Naomi to capture and then toss the firefly precisely when that being managed to enter the door of their room.
Stand clear.
Amidst those various operations, Andy conceived the idea of utilizing the backup drill in order to eliminate that creature. Once they agreed, Naomi then attempted to divert its attention. As Andy was meticulously preparing all the necessary items, he decided to switch his original plan to instead utilize the escape pod that was still in working order. As he was actively searching for his escape pod, Andy simultaneously assisted Naomi by shutting down every light source, which enabled Naomi to successfully evade the monster's gaze. Unfortunately, with Naomi in such a desperate situation, the capsule launch system could only be operated manually. Because of that situation, Andy made the decision to personally carry out the action. Well, just a little while before taking action, Naomi, who is currently holding the illuminated lamps, is now sprinting and successfully diverting that monster's focus directly over to Andy. Fully conscious of the potential danger that could result in his own demise, Andy nevertheless stubbornly insists on putting his very life on the line, including Leonard, who also states his willingness to sacrifice himself to save Naomi.
8, 4, 2, 1.
Following that impact, Naomi discovered that Andy had, in fact, managed to survive. Subsequently, both of them proceeded to walk outside, sharing a quiet moment as they observed the sunlight breaking over the horizon of this world. It was something that simultaneously astonished them and provided a small measure of hope. Although they knew that the rescue team that would arrive was still very far away, or about more than a year after the emergency message was previously sent by Andy. At this point, Andy was taken aback when he realized that Leonard had become active again, albeit with a system that had undergone an automatic renewal. Upon hearing that news, Andy, along with Naomi, let out a relieved smile as they both felt they stood a chance of enduring life on this world. That was the entire plot summary for the film Descent, which premiered in the year 2024, concluding with a happy ending on an unknown planet. In that case, this concludes our segment for today. I sincerely thank all of you who tuned in, and I look forward to seeing you again during our next opportunity. That was also cool. Bye.